Now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists for today's webinar. Larry Harding, Vice Chairman and Executive Director for Corporate Development for Radius. Frequently referenced as an expert resource for international trends in publications like the Wall Street Journal and CFO Magazine, Larry was awarded the prestigious Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award for 2013 in the Maryland region. Prior to Radius, Larry served as Vice President of International Finance for Sienna Corporation, where he managed, developed, and implemented the financial accounting and compliance functions for Sienna's international operations, which included over 30 overseas offices in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Larry is a licensed CPA in Massachusetts and holds a Bachelor of Science in Economics with a dual major in Finance and Accounting from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Hello, Larry.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for the introduction. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we will be sharing links during the webinar that may prove helpful answering some of the questions that have come in. Also, we'll share those assets via our Twitter page at RadiusWW and using the hashtag WinningGlobally. Larry, a number of questions have come in. One question came in on the topic of entity setup. Tamaria would like to know what some of the best practices are for selecting and establishing EORs in countries where she has 1 to 3 employees.
Okay, so small employee headcount is a pretty challenging area in terms of getting the right type of employee of record registration taken care of. The challenge is you need to be, at least minimally compliant with what the requirements are to process a locally valid payroll, but you really don't want to over-engineer things and set up more than what's minimally needed, both from a cost perspective, a time, and a flexibility. So it's a very challenging area. It's one that we deal with quite a bit. There are a handful of best practice approaches to think about, and a lot of times the right answer is a little bit sort of case-specific, depending on which specific countries or other countries or things are that you're doing. The one thing you don't want to do is have your U.S. headquartered company simply register a payroll in an overseas location. That's definitely the simplest. It takes care of the basic minimal requirements for 1 or 2 or 3 employees, but it creates some real permanent establishment challenges and potential issues. So unfortunately, the easiest answer is the one you want to avoid at all costs. But having said that, there are a handful of approaches that can be almost as simple that you can think about. So one item to consider, actually, especially if you're newly going into a country, is to think of a PEO, Professional Employers Organization. It's basically the equivalent of an employee leasing. It's not a long-term permanent solution, but for 6 to maybe 12 months, using a PEO organization to have that person on their payroll, basically, but working for you, can be a really simple approach. Not every country allows that, so you have to sort of check and see if a PEO solution is available in the country that you're looking at. But that may be the most simple to think about as a temporary solution. More permanently, what you can think about doing is having different entities register the payroll in the country. So for example, what we see a lot of and recommend is if you're going to have maybe a single employee in the UK, France, and Spain, one thing that you can think about is setting up only one full subsidiary that would, in the UK, would probably be the best out of those 3 countries, and then have the other European countries be, have the UK company register as the EOR in those other European countries. So, that approach sort of keeps things as minimal and basic as possible, but it hews to the approach of not having the U.S. company register the payroll or be the EOR. To the degree that you can set up regional hubs, Hong Kong, a Singapore, a UK, someplace that's reasonably straightforward to set up an entity, and then have those entities be the EOR in other countries in those regions can be a pretty helpful approach. No definitive answer, unfortunately, but just a couple of pieces of guidance to think about. But it really does tend to be case by case specific.